Hello and welcome to Contrarians. I'm Peter Van Onselen. This is the only show on Sky or anywhere else where we truly involve you, the viewers, by reading out your tweets and emails. Well, there's a lot to talk about domestically. We'll certainly be discussing Julia Gillard's class war and her attack on the northern suburbs of Sydney. We'll be looking at the budget as much as it was largely forgotten in between a lot of the fighting between the Liberal Party's Michael Kroger and Peter Costello and the ongoing saga that is Craig Thompson, that is the Peter Slipper affair. But going overseas is where I want to go on this editorial. Barack Obama, he has finally come out and declared that he is pro-gay marriage. Now, this is a significant moment. Whether you are opposed to gay marriage or whether you are pro it, one thing that is clear by Barack Obama, the President of the United States, coming out and saying what he has, is that he has put this issue on the agenda in a way that has not happened till now anywhere in the world. Sure, in the United States, the power to legislate in relation to gay marriage is a state responsibility rather than a federal one. They have a strong federated system over there. But, nonetheless, the President of the United States, as powerful as that position is, making that kind of a statement is a situation where this is likely to be an issue that gets more legs. And I have to say, good on Barack Obama for saying what he said. Even if you don't agree with gay marriage, it is an incredibly courageous decision. I don't say that in the Sir Humphrey Appleby category, but it is a courageous decision by the President of the United States to come out and say that he holds this issue strongly and that he's prepared to say that he's pro-gay marriage. It's a lot stronger than our Prime Minister has been prepared to be. A lot of us, including myself, don't believe her when she says that she's not pro-gay marriage. I believe that she is running from it because she has political concerns. Well, Barack Obama's got political concerns. God, yeah. He's going into a situation where he's got a US presidential election against Mitt Romney, a proven economic performer, in a situation where the religious right in the United States have got concerns about the Mormon candidate, but they are likely to vote for him now, given that the alternative is a president that believes in gay marriage. It's courageous that he's come out and said what he has. I'm not sure it's electorally that bright, but good on him for doing it. Electoral politics shouldn't always guide the way we think. Keep that in mind, Julia Gillard. Let's see what our panel think about this issue as well as domestic issues on the agenda. The Menzies Research Centre's Julie and Lisa, thanks for your company as always. Peter. Dr. Greg O'Mahony, appreciate your company.
Good to be here, Pete.
And welcome to the Contrarians for the first time, the McKell Institute's Peter Bentley. Thanks for your company.
Thanks very much, Peter.
Let me come straight to you, Peter Bentley. Why is our Prime Minister so gutless on the issue of gay marriage compared to the US President?
Well, can I say, Peter, I've always found this interesting in that people accuse Julia Gillard of changing her mind on issues like the carbon tax, and yet on gay marriage she took a very clear position to the last election. She said this was her position, and she stuck to it. And a number of people that accuse her and attack her...
Other than allowing a conscience vote on the issue when she promised not to before the election.
Well, there was a slight nuance there, but that was actually the National Conference that made that change. But the interesting thing, and I agree with your editorial, this is particularly in the US, it's going to be very interesting to see how this pans out with non-compulsory voting. And
what about the question? I mean, if I could jump in, I agree with what Pete said. I mean, if you looked at what Gillard said a couple of times in the last election, you got the impression every ounce of her believes in gay marriage, and she almost said as much at the Rudy Hill RSL, at that People's Assembly, but she's just politically constrained. I mean, that is not, you can't call that good leadership.
Well, as I say, I go again to the point that she took a position to the election and she stuck to it. Now, a lot of people disagree with it, a lot of people agree with it. There's been robust debate within the Labor Party, as we all know, and we saw at the last National Conference a whole range of a front bench having counter positions and supporting gay marriage.
You've been a gay rights activist for years. I mean, what's your view on the US President coming out the way that he has?
I think, Peter, it tells you a lot about the state of the Democratic Party's campaign in the US at the moment, that they are obviously having difficulties with their base in some areas, and so he's decided to hit this button in order to try and get Democrats out to vote for him again in some areas. Well, you know, I think you have to. It's a political system. It's a political system. He is facing a tough electoral fight against Mitt Romney. As you said, Romney is a proven performer. He knows the potency of this issue, and he knows that the Conservatives are not going to come out and vote for Romney.
I know you want to talk about this issue long and hard for a long time, but we've got to get back to the domestic stage. Now, Greg O'Mahony, Michael Kroger versus Peter Costello, two good mates. We'll put that in the context of the past, not the present. What on earth is going on? And why do we even care? I mean, one guy used to be a poly and he isn't anymore, whether he wants to be again or not. The other guy never was a politician, despite more than 20 years of pleadings by his party to actually step up to the plate. Why do we care? Why are we allowing them to distract us from the awful spectacle that is federal politics?
It's incredible. They're like a couple of bitter ex-lovers fighting over a messy breakup in a week where they could not be further from the centre of power. And I completely agree, Pete. They must be a massive thorn in the side of the coalition right now. It's bringing back memories of what we saw from the Keneally government in its dying months, those sort of personal stouches that made everyone look bad. I just think that it's no coincidence that this has occurred in a week where Mr Kroger's ex-wife was originally going to be sidestepped or put to one side in terms of being
there's
the
a
deputy
lot of
whip.
animosity in the Victoria division, but I mean, Julian, Lisa, whose side are you on? Peter Costello's or Michael Kroger's?
I'd like to say I thought that there was a great strategy behind what they did, but I think Greg's got it right here. It's been entirely unhelpful.
So whose side are you on?
Well, look, I'll say this much for Peter Costello. I saw him about 3 weeks ago. We had a talk in Melbourne, and he was talking about how
So
pleased...
whose seat was he after then? I mean, when he was talking to you, which seat was he going
for? For once, just let me finish my point. For once, let me finish my point. What Peter was saying was how impressed he was and how pleased he was with the generational changes that they'd made in Victoria and how important that had been and how he didn't manage to do... This didn't happen overnight. It needed the leadership of people like him to help steer that. So I think the idea that he had any intention of coming back is pretty fanciful based on the conversation I had.
So Michael Kroger's a liar in your view?
Well, I wasn't in conversations that he and Michael Kroger
Sure,
had, but it's not consistent.
From the consistency of the conversations you've had with Peter Costello, Michael Kroger's a liar.
Well, all I'm saying is I'm telling you the conversation I had with Peter Costello, and you've seen him write about this issue in the paper, in his column too, about the need for generational change in the party and what a good job the Victorians have done.
Julian, he just wanted to be part of that generational change in reverse, do you think, for a moment?
No, I mean, I think honestly he's very happy and he's been very supportive of all of the new members in Victoria. I mean, I think you've got a series of future leaders of the party who've come out of Victoria as a result of some of the work that he has been involved in engineering that change.
How angry are you about what Kroger said this morning? It was so personal, saying how painful it is to sit down and have lunch with Costello.
Well, I don't sit down and have lunches with Peter Costello like
Lisa's
Michael
getting
Kroger.
invited to have lunch with him. I mean, John Howard and Jeanette Howard never invited Peter Costello over for dinner the entire time that he was Prime Minister.
And can I say, I just think this is great. As you know, a centre-left person myself, I think this is just great sport.
Well, of course
watching,
you do, because you guys are
watching
getting
Costello.
smashed in the real
Absolutely,
game.
it's a great
And
distraction.
when the side issue happens, of course you think it's good because your
can I
mob is just
say-
such a joke of a government.
Well,
you're in a
it's
situation
good.
where a couple of has-beens are now having an argument, and that's the best that the government can hope for.
Well, can I say I was analysing the Joe Hockey and Michael Kroger exchange, and I couldn't quite hear exactly what he was saying, but I think Joe Hockey was heard to be kind of pointing at Kroger and demanding that this has to stop, this has to stop. But can I say, for all the political junkies out there today, Michael Kroger, this has to keep going with this. This is great. I think it should be on Sky News.
I've already
I think
invited
it should
him
be
on
on the
Australian agenda. We've got Penny Wong on to talk about the budget. We've got Mr Simpson, the independent, Mr Windsor rather, the independent, on to talk about all issues pertaining to Slipper and Thompson. But we'd love to have Michael Kroger. He's a good friend of Sky News. We'd love to have him come on to continue to offload and unload on Peter Costello.
Absolutely.
Greg, I mean, it is a true statement, isn't it, to say that the government trying to seek any mileage out of this distraction, if you like, between Kroger and Costello, at the end of the day, takes us away from what has been a budget that has fallen flat?
Well, I think that's right, but this was the government's week to win. I mean, this was the government's week to shine. It's a budget. We've heard so much about it. It was the week that they're honouring a promise that they said they'd make so many moons ago now about putting the nation into surplus. It should have been a great celebration for the government. I don't think on Friday night of this week the government can sort of be high-fiving strangers about the week that's been. I mean, you talk about distractions. It would be the most distraction-laced week for a federal budget in living memory, possibly ever.
Absolutely.
I mean, we were talking off air earlier. The day of the budget, major papers didn't talk about the budget for the first 8 pages. That's unheard of.
That's absolutely right. And you're right, Greg, that there had been a number of distractions this week. But the fact of the matter is, when we actually look at the budget, let's cut through the spin and actually look at the budget. Wayne Swan set himself 3 tasks. He said he'd deliver a budget and put it in surplus. He said he wanted to redistribute some of the benefits of the mining boom. And he said he wanted to invest in some major social initiatives. He ticked all 3 boxes. He's delivered a budget surplus. He's put funding into an NDIS.
Whoa. He's delivered a budget surplus. He certainly delivered a $44 billion deficit, double the forecast from 12 months ago. What he's done is he's delivered a forecast for a $1.5 billion surplus. Now, call me conservative, but I reckon when you've promised a $22 billion deficit and delivered a $44 billion deficit, your promise this year of a $1.5 billion surplus next year isn't worth diddly squat.
I think the other thing he's delivered is Peter some speaking notes. I mean, quite seriously, he spoke for weeks about this being a tough budget. It's a budget that increases expenditure, it increases tax, and it increases spending. And yet we've heard day in day out for 2 months is to be a tough budget, tough medicine.
Greg, let's look at the budget. Let's just stop for a second.
Do you think it was a tough budget?
I think it was a tough budget. I think there were major cuts to defence.
I
think there were major cuts to foreign aid, and I think one of the things that a lot of economists,
I mean, that's not very tough.
But from an economic point of view, when we look at this, let's look at the domestic economy.
So he was tough by beating up on the Somalis who give aid to, and he was tough by cutting the defence.
Two things that he did that I think were very intelligent and very financially prudent is he pulled money out of defence.
Let me get my pen down, I want to write this down.
Please do, Peter. He pulled money out of defence and he pulled money out of foreign aid. And what he's done is he's put money into the domestic economy through the education rebates, through cuts to family tax benefit aid. Now what that's done, and there are a lot of economists pre-budget that were making the point they were a little worried about where the cuts would be, in the sense that we have a global economy that is pretty rough.
Education.
The fact of the matter is, Julian, just let me finish quickly. The fact of the matter is these economists are now praising the budget because they've said it has acted, it has taken money out of areas that weren't going into the domestic economy and is actually providing a small stimulus, putting money into low and middle income workers.
This is a parallel universe of Labor talking points, to be honest. I mean, Give
us some Liberal talking points then, Julian.
This has been a fake surplus. No one believes he's going to get to the surplus. It's so small, it's a fig leaf.
You better not get there.
Almost.
Let's just put it that way.
He ain't. I mean, as you point out, Peter, he went from a $22 billion deficit to a $44 billion deficit. If we have a flood or a fire in summertime, and that's a regular occurrence in Australia, the surplus is gone. So no one believes it. He's also achieved it by bringing forward expenditure. And as for the education rebates, most people who've got kids spend money at the beginning of the year, not at the middle of the year. And this is going to be a spending package that goes on every single year for 20 years.
Do you support the education rebates?
No, I don't support them.
Do you support the baby bonus?
Well, no, the baby bonus is completely different.
Why is it different, though?
Okay, let me explain why. Two things. Firstly, it was designed to address a real policy problem, that's fertility, which was an issue. Australia's fertility rate had gone very small. Just listen to me. Secondly, it was given out at a time when we were running massive surpluses. You've just run a $44 billion deficit and you're still spending money at the moment on people who are not actually going to spend money on education. And it's not a once-off either. It's every single year of a child's education.
Well, can I just say
20 years of $800 per person. It's out of control.
Can I just say, that's the biggest point here, is that a one-off baby... I mean, don't get me wrong, Tony Abbott was completely incapable of making this point when he was asked the question, which was a disaster for him. But that said, the difference is very clear. The baby bonus you get once when a child is born. The education rebate, or whatever they're calling it, comes in twice a year, every year, the entire schooling of the child, without any mechanism available to make sure that it is spent on education. That's the difference.
I think there's 2 points. One, I never thought I'd see a Liberal Party that was arguing that $1 spent in a worker's pocket is actually better spent in the government's pocket. You know, this has kind of gone against the Liberal tradition that governments should be giving money back and letting people decide what they want to do with the funds.
I'm not sure Julian's saying he'd rather it got spent on pink bats. I think his point is that it shouldn't go into debt. It should stick with consolidated revenue to try to reduce debt. What you guys are doing, effectively, if you don't believe the $1.5 billion surplus, or even if you do, if you believe the $44 billion deficit, there is $820 cheques being written. Now, how is Wayne Swan getting the money to do that? He's borrowing at inflated overseas rates to be able to hand out money to people.
The fact of the matter is, what's happening?
The Prime Minister has the temerity to say in that context that the government is giving the Reserve Bank maximum room to move on cutting interest rates, when effectively they're putting in, by stealth, another half stimulus package. It's a very, very unusual confluence of things that have happened this week.
Well, I tell you what it is. We've got to take a commercial break.
Absolutely.
What it is it's the equivalent of you driving a car and say, because they keep talking about the different levers. It's the equivalent of driving a car and using the brake at the same time as using the accelerator. It is possible to drive it like that. It's just a shit way to drive. You're watching The Contrarians.